Welcome to Everything Dog Training with me, John McGuigan. Our goal is to bring you information on dog training methods which work and are kind, cutting through the myth and the folklore to help you have a better behaved, happier, emotionally healthier dog who is a joy to be around.
Hi everyone, I hope you're all doing well and are safe. Hope you're all getting through the pandemic as best as we can. And I've seen a few things saying that we're all in the same boat. We're not all in the same boat. We're all in the same storm, and some of us have got boats which are more capable than others. So some of us are unfortunately paying a greater share of the price of this global pandemic than others. And if you are interacting with other people, just bear that in mind. There's people that are out of work, not working, worried about their jobs, on reduced wages, and there's others who are fortunate enough to still be working. So do bear that in mind. It has a massive effect on people's behaviour and their mood. So be kind to people. It's really, really difficult just now. So today we are going to talk about training equipment. I'm going to give you and these are not opinions on it. I'll tell you the difference between an opinion and actually how they work. So there's a lot of misinformation out there about training various pieces of training equipment, and I'm going to break them all down and show you how they work. Okay, so the first thing I'd like to say is about intended use. Okay, so what we've got is what the piece of training equipment is intended for versus how that piece of training equipment can be abused. So if we look at, as an example of that, a ballpoint pen. Okay, a ballpoint pen is intended for use as a writing implement. It is not intended for use as a weapon. However, it could be used as a weapon if somebody is so inclined to do that. So you could stab somebody with a ballpoint pen. And I know that these analogies that I'm giving can be violent, but it's when that is abused. Okay, so when it's not intended for that, but it's when it's abused. So an example of that would be a flat collar. A flat collar is intended to sit on a dog's neck and attach the lead to it. It's not intended to be used as a piece of training equipment. It's not intended to be used to give the dog corrections. Okay, and I'll see people saying that you can give corrections with a flat collar. Yeah, you absolutely can, but then the flat collar, that's not its intended use. Somebody is using it to give the dog corrections, but it's not what the flat collar is intended to do. Okay, so we're going to talk about flat collars, head collars, harnesses, the different types of harnesses, leads, slip leads and choke chains, prong collars, and electric collars, and long leads as well. Okay, and I'll talk a little bit about muzzles. So when we're looking at all this, we have to, again, go back to that intended use. So we can use various things to change behavior. So basically what happens is that we move away, we either escape or avoid unpleasant stimuli or unpleasant things, and we move towards and act to prevent the loss of pleasant things. Okay, so that's a real simplification of that. Okay, so it's in its barest terms, or most basic terms rather. We've got good things. We want to gain good things, and we want to stop good things from going away. We want to avoid bad things and escape them when they happen. Okay, so bearing those four things in mind. Okay, have a look at or think about the training equipment and what it's used for. Okay, so flat collar. There's a move away within the positive training world from flat collars. Okay, and the reason for that is that a dog which pulls on a lead, okay, and attached to a lead and a flat collar is putting all the pressure of the dog's weight onto its throat, on its trachea. Okay, if you just listen just now, so all I'm going to do is, and that's with slight pressure. I don't know if you can hear the difference in my voice. So that's with really slight pressure on my Adam's apple there, just as I'm talking. Okay, So there's more vibration there. If I push a little bit faster, more, and you can hear the change in my voice. Okay, and you can also hear, so that's just changing how that affects my voice. Okay, now if I was to continue, sound like Joe Pasquale. So if I was to continue doing that over a certain amount of time, that's going to become uncomfortable really quickly, really quickly. I've mentioned before that I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as my hobby, and not this year, I've not, mind you. But the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, much of the submissions come by choking or strangling each other. Okay, sounds like fun, doesn't it? Okay, so I know what this pressure on your neck feels like, and all too well. Okay, so you've got that pressure on your collar, on your neck from the dog pulling forward on the collar. Okay. Now, again, that's pressure that is being exerted, but the collar is not intended to exert pressure on the dog's neck. Okay, it's just a side effect of it. Okay, and that's even if we're just holding the lead and moving forward without us pulling back on it or snapping harshly or with a correction on that collar. Okay. A trainer that I know, she commented that a flat collar is there to attach your dog's dog tag to. Okay, and that's basically what a flat collar is for. Okay, which I thought was a really nice way of putting it. Again, with all these things, it's a balance between our needs and the dog's needs. Okay, and we're looking to teach both parties as much as we can so that we get both of our needs met with the minimal amount of disruption and harshness to each party. Okay, so flat collar. Now, when I first got Logan, he was really unruly, and he's a really powerful dog. So he's 35 kilos, 34 kilos of muscle, and I wanted control of his head. So I did have him on a flat collar, but it was a big, broad, flat collar, and that meant that if I was moving away, and I had to move him away and moved him with my body. So what I would do is I would relax my upper body and move backwards with my feet. That it's much easier for him to turn, much easier for me rather to turn him when he was wearing a collar, because it's closer to his head. Okay, so in martial arts, we talk about control the head, control the body. If you ever see movies and clips of people controlling others, if they take a hold of their head and move their head, okay, and you see them turning their head side to side, it's really easy to control somebody that way. Okay, so what we've got, the benefit to us is that it makes it easy to control the dog, easier to control the dog, but the side effects for the adverse side effects for the dog of that is that we're putting pressure on the dog's neck and throat, which is not ideal. Okay, so that's a flat collar. Okay, now going to harnesses. Okay, so the harnesses I prefer, and I'm not being paid to endorse any of these harnesses. These are just the harnesses that I like. Okay, any harness which has a Y-shaped yoke at the front. Okay, so if you look at head on to the dog, and take a picture of the dog in profile, head on rather. Okay, in portrait. Okay, you see the dog in portrait. It would look like a Y, so left and right, and then come down the middle of the dog's chest. So perfect fit, make a really good Y-shaped harness, and that's what I used to walk Logan on. Rough wear, and it's RUFF wear, rough. Okay, rough wear, make a good Y-shaped yoke harness, and also bully billows, just as it sounds, bully and billows like pillows. Okay, bully billows, I've got a new harness coming out, which are Y-shaped yokes. Okay, and what a Y-shaped yoke does is it allows the dog to freely move their shoulders. Okay, so other harnesses, when you look at them, and I'll go into some of them in more detail, other harnesses, when you look at them, restrict the dog's shoulders, so the dog is not able to move properly, that flowing movement from the shoulder. So imagine that we take a belt, okay, and I put it just below your butt cheeks, okay, and then I tighten it, and now we go for a walk. Okay, so you see that that movement is restricting your hip movement. So some harnesses restrict the dog's shoulder movement. Okay, or very often you'll see people, women mainly, wearing skirts which are restrictive. Okay, and like a short tight skirt that goes down to just above or just below the knees. And you can see the what I would look at there is can you run in that? And the answer is probably not. Okay. All right. So you're wanting for a harness to have the dog's shoulders and back end, but the harness is attached to the front end. The dog's shoulders moving freely. Okay. With the perfect fit does have a front clip, but it's not intended to have the lead attached to the front clip. Okay, it's intended, if you're going to use it, you use both front and back clip. Okay, and I'll talk about front clip harnesses next. Okay, so that's the back clip or Y-shaped yoke. Okay, so freely Y-shaped yoke, not disrupting the dog's shoulders, and ideally what we're looking for is that the harness clip to go kind of between roundabout at the dog's shoulder blades, there or thereabouts. Okay, so we're wanting it just forward of the midline, okay, or forward of the midline rather. So there's some harnesses that you get which are pulling harnesses that you'll have for racing, for sledding, for weight pulling, things like that, and they're designed to allow the dog to pull forward through that harness, but the weight is back the way. Okay, so people often I get people turning up and they'll have a harness which is not appropriate for training, and it's because the harness clip that attaches to us through the lead is far too far down the dog's back. Okay, so because I do a lot of work with dogs that are aggressive and reactive towards other dogs, I want to be able to have physical control of the front end if I need to. And the further the clip clips down the back end of the dog, so further down towards the tail or the smaller the back, the harder it is for the dog, for us to physically control the front end if we need to. Okay. Now, going on from that, I'm going to say this is, I did a little video on this. It's on my YouTube channel and on my Facebook from a couple of years ago. And you'll hear this often, that harnesses cause pulling. Okay. And I'm going to say this is not an opinion. Okay. This is the science of behavior change. Harnesses do not cause pulling. They just don't. They don't cause pulling. They don't cause pulling any more than you getting into a Ferrari causes you to drive fast. It allows you to drive fast, but it doesn't cause you to drive fast. What causes you to drive fast is that you enjoy driving fast, or you get to go faster to your destination. Okay, so it's the results of our behavior that make the behavior happen again the next time. Okay, so a harness does not cause pulling. Okay, and I will invite anybody to challenge me on that and go through the science of this. Okay, harnesses do not cause pulling. And in case you didn't hear me, harnesses do not cause pulling. They allow the dog to pull. They don't cause the dog to pull. Okay. All right. So moving on from that, front clip harness. Front clip harness is a harness, just as it sounds. It has a clip for the leash on the front, or the lead on the front of the harness, or it moves, the lead attaches in some way across the front of the harness. Okay, so what happens there is how those harnesses work is the dog moves forward, and as they move forward, they get pulled off balance. Okay, so they get pulled off balance, and the aim or the thought is with these harnesses that in order for the dog not to pull, the dog then relieves that pressure by walking by your side. Okay, so it's the result of the discomfort, the dog moving forward on the harness and then relieving that pressure on their body, which causes the dog to walk next to you. Okay, all right. Now, with a front pull harness, imagine again, and I'm just explaining how these things work. Okay, there's with sometimes we have to use a piece of training equipment to get in and start the process. Okay, we just do. Okay, and imagine I'm walking down the street. You're on my left side. I've got a lead attached to you, but it's attached to your solar plexus. Okay, or it's attached through some device through your solar plexus to your left shoulder. And every time that you move forward and you move out of my space, a slow down, or a pull back, and that pulls you round. Okay, so you're constantly pulling against that, and it's pulling you off course. Okay, so that's going to become annoying, isn't it? All right. Now, the front clip harness, again, it's they're very often used to physically control the dog. Okay, and it's to allow us an easier life. So with a lot of these things that you'll hear me talking about in this episode, the dog is paying the price for us not teaching them. Okay, and I really don't know how to say that any more gently than that, okay, or with any more sympathy. The dog is paying the price for us not teaching the dog to walk with us, okay, and it's up to us to bring that dog into life and teach them to walk with us, okay. And I think it's only fair that we do that, okay, because our dogs shouldn't constantly be paying the price. We shouldn't ask our dogs to fit in with us all the time. It should be up to us to teach them, and that's just my view on it. Okay, so front clip harnesses pull the dog off balance. Okay, now if the dog is pulling and you start walking backwards, okay, so you again relax your upper body and start walking backwards, that will turn the dog as gently as we possibly can to move with you. Okay, so you see how that's done with body movement and not with our arms, which I talked about in the loose lead walking episode, which I think was episode 1 or 2 thereabouts. Okay, but you can go back through the back catalogue and listen to that if you're inclined to. Okay, so that's a front clip harness. Moving on from that, there are no pull harnesses. So a no pull harness it can be a front clip harness or it can be a back clip harness, but they're basically designed that as the dog pulls, again, causes some sort of restriction or discomfort in the dog, and the dog relieves that pressure by walking next to you. Okay, so we're using a negative reinforcement strategy, and I'm going to talk about negative reinforcement in a future episode, but I briefly talked about it recently when I talk about positive reinforcement and the difference between positive and negative reinforcement in their scientific terms and what they are defined by or as, what they're defined as. Okay, so front clip harnesses and no pull harnesses work by negative reinforcement. Okay, now years ago when we got our first dog when I was a boy, okay, well, I was a boy, I was 26, 27, and we put her on a no pull harness which attached to the back. So that harness had a drawstring, and the drawstring went down attached by a little cinch toggle that you would have on a knapsack for your draw cord. So it went down there onto Molly's back through, so underneath her armpits from the back to the front, and then back through a collar and then up onto and attached that way. So basically, as she pulled forward, she caused forward pressure down on her neck as she was moving forward. Okay, and the thought behind that is that the dog will then relieve that pressure, but a lot of the time the dog has just learned to pull so well for so long that all that you're doing is giving the dog a hard time for no benefit. Okay, and because I didn't understand this at the time and I was told you need to keep that nice and snug on her, she ended up with a pressure sore on her back from where the toggle was pushed onto her back. And when I realised that, I stopped using it. Okay, so that's a no pull harness. So there's various ones on the market. Okay, and again, you might decide that you want to use this. So if you get a massive dog that pulls like a train, and you're a small person who's perhaps not physically strong, you may have to use some piece of training equipment to get the thing started. Okay, but we're looking to make it the least amount of unpleasant as we possibly can. That's what we're looking for with training equipment. In fact, with all the stuff that we were doing, most positive, so we're looking for the most pleasant way that we can train. And if we're having to physically move the dog, a variety of other things which we'll talk about in future episodes, it's the least amount of unpleasant as we possibly can. Okay, so there's a way that we can remove a toddler from a supermarket if they're having a tantrum, and we can do that as kindly as possible, but it's still unpleasant for the toddler. or we could drag them by the scruff of the neck and drag them along the floor. Not advocating you do that. Please don't do that, okay? But you know the point I'm making, hopefully. And when I say hopefully, looking at some of the comments that you see on social media, sometimes you wonder, okay, because you look at these car crash conversations and you think, are you even reading the same words as I'm reading? Are you on the same planet? Okay, so not advocating that we drag toddlers along the floor in the supermarket, and I'm not advocating that we grab them by the scruff of the neck, but sometimes we do need to remove them, okay? So pick them up, relax, move them, okay? Okay, so now going on to slip leads. Okay, so a slip lead is a lead which looks like a noose. Okay, so just as it sounds, it's one long piece of lead which has a circular ring in the end, and then it feeds back through. Okay, so it's just loops over the dog's head, and then we can take it off. Now, as far as I know, they were designed as gun dog leads. Okay, they were designed primarily as gun dog leads because gun dogs are working off lead and with no collar or harness on, and that's so that they don't get hounds and gun dogs. So that as they're moving through the countryside, they don't get snared with a hot collar or a harness on a branch or anything like that. So gun dog leads are generally used to put the dog on a lead, take them out of the car, move them into the area where they're going to be working, and then let them off. Okay, so it's really a transport lead. It's used for short distances, move from here to there. Okay, and you'll often see them in vet surgeries. Okay, so they're dead easy to put on and they're dead easy to take off. Okay, but they're easy to put on because we don't have to fasten them. We just lasso it over the dog's head, bring it in so that it's tight enough that it can't get back off, and then move the dog. Okay, now you see with that, just by its design, if the dog pulls forward, that's going to tighten up. Okay, and it's just how it works. So I see trainers that, because I'll talk about choke chains in a second, because the choke chain is the same design as a slip lead. Just because it's a soft lead doesn't mean that it can't be used to tighten up and choke the dog. Okay, so there's Logan's having a shake of his ears. So very often what I'll do is I'll see the dog being corrected on a slip lead. Okay, so the dog does something wrong, and a correction with a snap of the wrist or a snap of the arm is given on the dog's neck. Okay, or there's pressure put on the dog's neck to say stop doing that, and when they stop doing that, release that pressure. Okay, so that's by any description or any definition of that's a noose around the dog's neck, which is used to apply pressure and release pressure. Okay, so it's either, if you do that, I'm going to hurt you by putting that pressure in your neck, and then when you do the behavior that I like, I'm going to release that pressure. Okay, so that's a slip lead. So the slip lead, if it's used, again, when I talked about at the top of the podcast, the intended use for a slip lead is for a dog that is well trained to walk with you from one place to another and to be let off lead with no collar or harness on. That's its intention. Okay, it's when the slip lead is then abused and used as a training tool. So its intended use is not as a training tool. Its intended use is for transport. It's when it's used as a training tool, and it's used to give the dog a correction and release that correction when the dog does well. Okay, and again, challenge anybody to, or I'll invite anybody to challenge me on that. Okay, using proper science and not folklore. Okay, so choke chain. Choke chain is just the same design. Okay, so it's a noose chain. Okay, and the lead attaches to one side of the chain, and as the dog pulls forward, that tightens up. Okay, now historically it's been used to, when a dog does something we don't like, we correct the dog. So we're pulling it and snapping. So it's like snap, snap. Okay, on the lead. So we're pulling back with our arms. Okay, so the dog moves out of heel position. they get snapped back. So there's a lead pop, and they call it a lead pop because that's apparently something nice, because it's just a pop on the lead. Not if you're on the receiving end. It's like me popping you in the nose with a fist, okay, or you popping me in the nose with a fist. You can make it sound like a pop all day long, but you're still hitting me, okay. So lead correction on the choke chain, all right, and the pressure going on and coming off is what motivates the dog to do the behaviors that you like. Okay, so that's a choke chain. Now, what you'll hear people saying, it's called a check chain as well. Okay, it's just a check chain because we're just checking the dog, right? So if it's a check chain and not a choke chain, and we're just checking the dog, what are we checking the dog for? If you don't do that, I will do this. Okay, so I don't know if this is just kind of local west of Scotland stuff, but we used to say when we were young, growing up in the 80s, and you'd say that you got checked off your old neighbour. Okay, so she would rattle the window and check you for kicking the ball off the back fence or something like that. Okay, now she was basically saying to you, see if you don't do this, I'm going to come out and I'm going to give you into trouble. And at that time, that meant something. Or then go and tell your parents. And then you'd be like that, oh, I don't want to get, we get properly in this trouble, so we get, smacked or grounded. Okay. So you're getting checked that if you don't do something, something else is coming. Okay. So when people start saying with a choke chain, I'll only have to use I just have to click it. Okay. I just have to click that a little bit and the dog pays attention. That's because the click and the sound of metal on metal and the gentle feeling, okay, or the slight feeling of the change of the pressure in a dog's neck is now a warning. Stop doing that or I'm going to hurt you. Okay, so that's what it means. Okay, that's what the choke chain means. So, and what will happen is that with a lot of dogs is that they will just test that occasionally. They'll just say, is it worth it? Okay, and we also get a build-up of tolerance to that. Okay, so going back to the jiu-jitsu analogy, when I first started doing jiu-jitsu, having a big guy sitting on top of you, sitting on your diaphragm, being unable to breathe and pinning you down for you and being unable to move is massively restrictive and suffocating. But the more that you do this, the more you gain tolerance for it, and it becomes less and less and less unpleasant each time till you start working out, I'm actually okay here. So he then has to put more pressure on you, okay, in order for you to get that same feeling, okay. So you build up a tolerance to it the same way as we do with a lot of other things. Heat, cold, and we know about drugs, tolerances to drugs. So if you're exposed to something over and over and over again, especially with gradually increasing exposure, you'll build up a tolerance to that. Okay, so now we have to use harsher corrections more often. Okay, so that's what happens with the choke chain. I'm going to talk about punishment calluses in a future episode. Okay, so punishment calluses is a really interesting concept as well. Okay, so moving on to a half check. Okay, so a half check or a half choke is a piece of cloth or leather which has a chain in between it. The lead attaches to the chain, and when the dog pulls forward, that chain tightens up. Okay, the chain tightens up and then it goes snug on the dog's neck, or it pulls tight across the dog's throat, one of the two of those. Okay, so it's kind of halfway between a choke chain and a flat collar. Now, some people like to use, it's also called a martingale, okay, I think it is a martingale. Yep, that's how it'll be spelled, martingale. And people with dogs like bulldogs, or a dog which has got a much thicker neck than the breadth of the head, very often like to use a martingale, because they can put it on, the dog can wear that comfortably, but if it go to move forward, it just tightens round underneath the dog's chin. Okay, so a flat collar would just pop straight off if the dog turned around and walked back, whereas a martingale wouldn't. Okay, so again, a martingale can be used in the same way as a choke chain, But don't assume that just because a dog is wearing a martingale that's what the person's using it for. Okay, all right. So that's a martingale. Now looking at a prong collar. So if you're interested in what a prong collar looks like, and please don't use them, okay? Prong collar is a series of, it looks like a medieval torture device, okay? And it's a series of links which all link in together, and the prongs are on the inside. The prongs should be rounded, okay? So they shouldn't be sharp, they should be rounded, okay? Attaches onto the dog, designed the same way as a martingale. So it's got that chain in the middle, which the lead attaches to, and as the dog moves forward, the collar tightens up. And as the collar tightens up, the prongs move closer in towards each other, and they pinch the dog's skin or dig into the dog's neck. So it'll be one of the two, depending on the dog's anatomy. Okay, so a prong collar will often be called a pinch collar as well, because it's pinching the dog's neck. So you hear the myth and folklore that a prong collar mimics a mother biting the back of a puppy's neck, and this is why it's effective. Okay, and I'm just going to call BS on that right now. It's just garbage. I can't even begin to tell you how ridiculous it is. The dog knows you're not a dog. The dog knows you're not his mum, okay, or her mum, okay. Good mothers, good dams, that are rearing a litter don't use that pinching anyway. They don't nip the dog or bite the puppy in the back of the neck. When a mother is weaning the dog, what they'll do is they generally, the puppy round about 5 weeks, 4 or 5 weeks old, around about that time, when they're starting to wean them, if the pup goes on to the mum's teat, mum just walks away. Okay, so the mum just says it's not yours anymore and just walks off. Okay, so you see how a good dam still won't bite or nip the puppy. Okay, won't even growl at them. A really good dam. Okay. The other thing I would ask, if you ever hear anybody saying this, ask the person, do you eat your dog's feces to clean up after them? Okay, so that's the answer to that, because that's what a good mother does. Okay, that's what a mother does to pups. Licks the dog's anus, the puppy's anus, the dog, in order to stimulate defecation, and then cleans it up by eating it. Okay, so that's what a female dog, a dam, does. Okay, so you can, if you're ever challenged on that, just ask them that question and it should shut them up. Okay, so it does not mimic. That's not what it does. It's not what it's just not what it does. Just not what it does. Okay, what it does is it pinches the dog's neck or digs into the dog's neck. So as the dog moves forward to pull, okay, that causes pain, discomfort, or annoyance. It's always one of those three things. Okay, pain, discomfort, or annoyance. And the dog again relieves that pressure. So that's if it's used by relieving the pressure of that. And the other thing that you could do with a prong collar is when a dog does a behaviour that you don't like, you correct the dog by yanking on that lead. Now, with my previous, I've used a prong collar in the past because I thought that I needed to, and I was told all the lies. It doesn't hurt. I used it on my Mastiff boy, and he used to, when I corrected him, he actually used to yelp in pain. And the trainer at the time, and again, you don't know what you don't know. And this is why I'm saying to be compassionate with people. The trainer that I use at the time says he's not in pain, he's just protesting. Yeah, I know why he's protesting, because he's in pain, mate. Okay, now that's now what I know. Okay, because if you did that to me, I would be protesting as well. Stop hurting me, please. Okay. Now, because it's so effective at delivering pain, discomfort, and annoyance, it can be much more effective than a choke chain. Okay. So it's just like if you think about, if you press down on a rounded ball, okay, so a ball about the size of a tennis ball, and you press your hand down on it with force, okay, now you get that ballpoint pen we were talking about, and you hold it there and you push it down again, okay, with the same pressure. You're going to get all that pressure through that one point into your hand versus spread over the weight of that. So it's just physics in this. Okay, so that's a prong collar, and I used prong collars before. And yeah, they work, but the fallout is that you're hurting your dog, you're damaging your relationship potentially, and then all that stress has to go somewhere. So there's a fantastic book called The Body Keeps the Score. And it's called, it's by Bessel van der Kolk, who is, I think he's a doctor actually. Either a doctor, a psychologist, or a neuroscientist. So Bessel van der Kolk, The Body Keeps the Score. Basically, any trauma that we experience gets locked in the body somewhere. Okay, so it causes increased stress hormones, which then affect your health. That's if it's becoming internalized, or it becomes externalized into more aggressive behavior, which might pop up somewhere else. Okay, so that's why not to use a prong collar. Okay, all right, now moving on from that, the electric collar. Electric collar or shock collar. Now you'll hear proponents of e-collars saying that, again, they don't hurt. And I'll always ask, how do they work? Okay. Now what they'll turn around and say is they work by giving information to the dog, okay, to the dog, that the dog responds to. Okay. Yeah. Now that's true, that you have the dog information, but what's the motivation there? And why is the dog responding? Okay, and how is that affecting behavior? So that's what we're looking at there. And I'm going to talk more about e-collars in a future podcast episode, because there's a lot to go into it, and there's a lot of myth and folklore again surrounding it. Okay, so it's pain, annoyance, or discomfort, and that's how a prong collar, a choke chain, and an e-collar will work. Okay, for their intended use. Okay, and that's important. Okay, because a flat collar and a Y-shaped harness are not intended to be to have that use. Okay, they can do if they're not used appropriately, but that's not their intended use. Whereas a choke chain, prong collar, and e-collar, that is their intended use. Okay, and there's no other way around it. That's what they're intended for. Stop doing that, or I'll hurt you. If you do the behavior that I like, I'll stop hurting you, or I'll stop annoying you. Now, going on to that annoyance or discomfort thing, okay, when people saying it's just mild, and I go, yeah, cool, it's just mild. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a tiny pebble or tiny stone, and I'm going to put it inside your sock, and it's going to rattle about your sock all day. Okay, and you've got to walk around all day long with that in it. Now, it's not painful, but it's really annoying, and it's going to cause you to be annoyed, and the longer it's there, the more annoyance it's going to cause, and that grumbling level of like that stone, that pebble, that tiny piece of stone is still in between my sock and my foot. That's going to have an effect on your mood, and then an effect on your overall behavior. All right, and you will work in order to get rid of that. So what would you do? I'll pause. Think about, what would you do if you had a stone in your shoe, okay, in your sock? Going to take your sock off, and you're going to remove that stone. Okay. The other thing is, even if it's not a stone, put your sock on wrong, okay, or your sock is wet, or you're wearing shoes. I remember this when I was a child, and you're wearing wellies or gumboots, as you would call them in other countries. Okay, so rubber boots that were my brother's before me. And I was having to grow into them. And as you're walking, your sock then starts falling down your leg, and then bunches up around your heel, and then twists. Okay, so that's not even a stone. That's just your sock not fitting properly, and it's going to cause enough annoyance that will cause you to act in order to avoid it. And imagine you can't avoid it now. Imagine that's there all the time as a threat. I'm going to do that to you. Okay, all right. That's going to get tiresome really, really quickly. Okay, so that's e-collars, but I'm going to talk more in detail in e-collars in the future. Okay, now the long lead. Moving on to long leads. I talked a little bit in my the. Did you hear that? That's long. I don't know if the microphone's picking that up. He started either snoring or dreaming, or he's grumbling because I'm talking and he's trying to sleep. Oh, leave me alone, Dad, be quiet. Okay, right, so the long lead. So talked at length on the length of the lead that it's best to use for teaching a dog to walk in a lead in my loose lead walking podcast, which was episode 1 or 2, I think. Okay, so we're looking at long line. Now the long lines that I use are either 5 meters, so that's about 15.5 feet, or 10 meters, which is 33 feet. Okay, so those are the 2 long leads that I will use. Now I will use a lead to slow the dog down and stop them. Okay, so it's basically to prevent unwanted behaviours. I don't use it to reel the dog in like a marlin. Okay, so it's to put pressure in a dog's neck or harness, and then relieve that pressure. So I'm not using it like a lunge line with a horse. Okay, that's not how I'm using it. So you'll hear people saying that an e-collar is effectively the same as a long lead. Okay, it's really, really, really not. It's really not. And if somebody is using a long lead the same way as they're using an e-collar, it will generally be because they're using pressure release. Okay, so they're putting pressure on the dog in some way and then releasing that pressure in order to get the behavior that they want. Oh, sorry, when they get the behavior that they want. Okay, so the long leads are there basically to make sure your dog doesn't escape. Okay, or doesn't leave with you. And if you're using your movement properly and you're using your movement well, and you've built your bond well, your dog very often will stay within a 10-meter range of you. Okay, if we're using our lead, our movement well, and observing our dog and the environment well. Okay, so I use a 5-meter and a 10-meter lead depending on what I'm using. Okay. Lastly, on the training equipment, we're going to look at head collars. So head collar is another a head halter. Okay, so sometimes they look like muzzles. Goes round the dog's snout and attaches behind the dog's neck. And again, that puts pressure on the dog's head and neck, so the dog relieves that pressure. Okay, now that's what they're intended for. That's their intended use. So people, when you see the marketing of these tools is good, because it'll say it's like the miracle cure and the dog will walk easily with you and have a pleasant experience. Okay, there was one I remember long time ago working with a trainer, and she explained to me that this specific head collar sat on the pressure points on the dog's head and massaged them and gave the dog a pleasant feeling. Okay, it's all types of nonsense going on with that statement. All right, that's not what they do. Okay, it's round the dog's head, dog pulls, pressure on the dog's neck, dog relieves that pressure by walking next to you. Okay, so they're on a negative reinforcement contingency. Okay, so they're moving or they're staying with you in order to relieve that pressure. Now, having said that, head collar is the one piece of training equipment that I will sometimes use, and I will use it if there is a dog. We've got a dog whose behaviour is so intense. Okay, so we've got a lot of energy in that dog, lack of skill in the owner, a lot of time lack of physical size and strength. Okay, so they're a small owner with little training skills, with a powerful dog that has had a long history of doing aberrant behaviour, and it's aberrant as far as we are concerned. Okay, so with that combination, again, we need to start somewhere, and I very, very, very quickly will teach them how to handle that lead well, so that it's the least amount of unpleasant as we can possibly make it. But we do need to have physical control of that dog, and the head collar is for me is an acceptable way to use that. Okay, but I'm always working as fast as I can. Okay, to get the dog on a flat collar first, and then hopefully onto a harness, onto a solid harness. Okay, so that's how I will use them. I'll use them in some instances. Okay, and that's not me condoning their use, and that's not me condemning their use. Okay, that's just me saying this is how I use them, and it's in a really unique circumstances. Okay, and I'm constantly working to see can we get that off as quickly as possible? And improving everything that I'm doing to see is it necessary in the first place. Okay, and out of the hundreds of dogs I work with over the course of a year, we're probably, I don't think I could count on half of the fingers in one hand how many times the dog's on a head collar. Okay. All right, so that's looking at training equipment. Okay, so there's a lot in that. So all I just wanted for you to have a think about is if you're using a piece of training equipment, or so whether it's a front clip harness, a head collar, or if you're using the more aversive training tools like a choke chain and a prong collar or an e-collar, is sit down and think about how is this affecting the dog's behaviour, and then look at the science behind it. So don't, and it's the textbooks that you have to look at. Okay, you have to do some research into learning theory. Okay, it's not your mate that's used a choke chain for years and has never had any difficulty with his dog, and his dog loves it. Okay, on that, you'll hear people saying when they pick up the prong collar or the choke chain, the dog runs to the door wagging their tail. So my dog loves his prong collar. I can assure you he doesn't. What he's just done is he's just associated the prong collar or the choke chain going on with him getting out and up for a walk, and it's the walk that he loves. Okay, he just has to bear that piece of training equipment going on to him in order to get out there. Okay, so if you look at a £20 note, okay, so £20 note in the UK is kind of pink and purple in colour. All right, and if somebody gave me a £20 note, £20, I'd go, oh, cool. That's good. Okay, so I could buy a cinema ticket, buy some shopping, okay, petrol for my car. Okay, so there's something there that I can go, oh, that's cool. Okay, there's something, it's substantial enough that I would go, well, that's a good gift. Okay, I don't love, they're now plastic. Okay, the banknotes in the UK, they're now plastic. Okay, but I don't love purple plastic. Right? It's associated, all that it is something that means that I can do something else with it. Okay, so that's what when your dog doesn't love your leather lead. Okay, your dog doesn't love the flat collar. They love the walk that's associated with that. Okay, and I'll talk more about that in future episodes as well. All right, so a couple of things just for housekeeping as we're finishing up. I'm starting an ambassador. Starting an ambassador program for my online courses. So you will receive heavy discounts on the courses, and you will also, if you're successful, you'll get commission if you're passing those courses on to your clients and your friends. So you could end up getting free training with me if you're successful, and you're also passing those discounts on to somebody else. So as an ambassador, you get the discount, you're able to pass on discounts to other people, and we're able to get this information out to improve the lives of dogs, okay, and for yourselves as well. So continuing your education and making your dog's lives better. So it's just ripple effects, and I'm looking for your help with it. Okay, so if you're at all interested, email me info@glasgowdogtrainer.co.uk. So that's info@glasgowdogtrainer.co.uk for the ambassador program. Some good incentives on that, okay, and the discounts are heavy for you as an ambassador, and I'd welcome you to get in touch. I won't be taking everybody, okay, so it's just the right people that I'm wanting for it. Yeah, massive thanks again for listening to this. Please do get in touch with me. Any questions that you've got on the information that I've covered in today's episode, ping me an email. I will most certainly respond to you, and then I'll take your question on and I'll answer it at the beginning of the next podcast that I do after I get it. Okay, so keep your emails coming in, and stay safe, wear your mask, keep your distance, wash your hands, look after each other. Remember that we have other people are taking their bigger share of the burden of the pandemic than others, and be well, look after yourselves. Love and peace to you all.
So a massive thanks for listening today. If you're at all interested in learning more about dog training, I have several online courses available. If you go to Glasgow Dog Trainer Online, glasgow.thinkific.com. That's Glasgow Dog Trainer Online.thinkific.com. There's a number of training courses there which are both standalone courses and membership courses. The dog training and behaviour modification course is £15 per month, and for that you get 10 new lessons every month on a rolling contract, kind of like Netflix. If you're interested in that course, if you use the discount code INTRO, INTRO 20, INTRO 20, and 20 is a 20, so that's INTRO 20. At the checkout, you'll get 20% off for the first 3 years.